My name is Rob, 32 years old, from Colorado, and I won $390 million in the state lottery. Nobody knew. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even my family. So I decided to test them. I called pretending to be broke and desperate. My mom hung up on me. My brother called me a loser. But my little sister Ashley, she drove 200 miles with her last $500 to help me. Before I dive into how my life changed forever, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever wondered what you'd do with millions. Growing up in Boulder, Colorado wasn't exactly picture perfect. My childhood home was modest, a small 3-bedroom ranch-style house with fading blue paint that my dad swore he'd refresh every summer but never did. Our family was what polite society would call strained. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my relationship with my father deteriorated into occasional birthday calls and awkward Christmas visits. He moved to Arizona with his new wife, and we became more like distant acquaintances than father and son. My younger sister Ashley was my rock throughout those turbulent years. 3 years younger than me, she had this uncanny ability to find optimism in our fractured family situation. We'd spend hours building elaborate forts in the backyard, creating our own little world where parents didn't yell and bills didn't pile up on the kitchen counter. Ashley was the one who held my hand at night when Mom would cry herself to sleep after the divorce. "We have each other, Robbie," she'd whisper in the darkness. "That's all that matters." Mom did her best, working double shifts as a hospital administrator to keep us fed and housed, but the financial and emotional strain took its toll. By the time I hit high school, she had remarried to Gerald, a real estate agent with a fondness for golf and criticizing my career choices. Our home became his castle, and Ashley and I learned to walk quietly around his moods. As adults, geography and life pulled us in different directions. I stayed in Colorado, while Ashley moved to Nebraska for nursing school, eventually settling there. My brother Mark, 5 years older than me, headed to Chicago where he worked his way up in finance, building what he loved to call his empire during our increasingly rare family phone calls. We'd gone from sharing bunk beds to sharing only occasional text messages on birthdays and holidays. My life before the lottery win was painfully ordinary. I worked as an IT specialist for a mid-sized insurance company, fixing printer jams and resetting forgotten passwords. My apartment was a 1-bedroom unit in a complex full of similar 9-to-5 workers. The walls were thin enough that I knew my neighbors' TV schedules by heart. My furniture consisted mainly of items from discount stores and a few IKEA pieces I'd assembled with varying degrees of success. My pride and joy was my gaming setup, the one area where I splurged a little. Financially, I was treading water, not drowning but certainly not swimming freely. Student loans from my computer science degree hung around my neck like an albatross, demanding $500 of my monthly income. My used Honda Civic needed repairs I kept putting off. Rent increased every year, while my salary remained stubbornly static. My refrigerator typically contained half-empty condiment bottles, some dubious leftovers, and a 6-pack of whatever beer was on sale that week. My one consistent luxury was a lottery ticket each week, $10 every Friday, like clockwork. My coworkers teased me about it, calling it my retirement plan. I'd laugh along, but deep down, those tickets represented something more than just a long shot at wealth. They were my small weekly rebellion against a life of mediocrity, a tiny purchased dream that maybe, just maybe, things could change dramatically. Then came the layoffs. Our company was restructuring, which everyone knows is corporate speak for cutting costs by cutting people. I received the email on a Tuesday morning, requesting my presence in the conference room at 2:30. The HR representative had the decency to look uncomfortable as she slid the severance package across the table, explaining I had 3 weeks to transition my responsibilities. The package would cover 2 months of expenses if I was frugal, but the job market was tight, and my specialized skills weren't as in demand as I'd hoped. The weeks that followed were a blur of unanswered applications and increasingly desperate emails to contacts in the industry. Each day, I'd wake up with a knot of anxiety that grew tighter as rejection emails accumulated in my inbox. My savings dwindled as I stretched them to cover rent, utilities, and the bare minimum of groceries. I started skipping meals, letting the gas tank run dangerously low, and ignoring increasingly urgent calls from credit card companies. The day that changed everything didn't announce itself with fanfare. It was a Wednesday, unremarkable in every way. I had driven to a gas station on the edge of town where gas was 5 cents cheaper per gallon. After filling up with the last $20 in my checking account, I headed inside to pay. The line was long, giving me time to stare at the lottery display behind the counter. The jackpot had grown to $390 million, the largest in state history. I shouldn't have done it. Every rational part of my brain screamed that the $10 in my wallet should go toward food, not a statistical impossibility. But something, call it desperation or intuition, made me add a quick-pick ticket to my purchase. The cashier, a teenager with braces and a name tag that read Justin, printed the ticket with a bored expression, completely unaware he was handing me what would become the most important piece of paper in my life. As I walked back to my car, I tucked the ticket into my wallet without looking at it, already regretting the impulse purchase. Little did I know that those random numbers would transform me from a desperate, unemployed IT guy into one of the wealthiest individuals in the state overnight. The drawing was scheduled for 8 o'clock that evening. I hadn't planned on watching it, figuring I'd check the numbers online the next day like I usually did. But with no job to wake up for, and nothing but ramen noodles and a half-empty bag of tortilla chips for dinner, I found myself slumped on my second-hand couch, flicking through channels until the local news came on. The peppy blonde announcer with an overly enthusiastic smile introduced the lottery segment with rehearsed excitement. Tonight's jackpot is a record-breaking $390 million. Could you be our lucky winner? I snorted, thinking of the lone ticket in my wallet. Sure, lady. Me and about 1 million other desperate dreamers. I didn't even bother retrieving my ticket as the drawing began. The mechanical balls tumbled hypnotically in their transparent chamber. The first number popped up, 17. I vaguely remembered that might have been on my ticket, but didn't think much of it. The second number, 32. My age. Huh, that's a coincidence. Third number, 41. Fourth, 8. Fifth, 59. With each number called, a strange sensation began building in my chest. I wasn't sure if I remembered correctly, but these numbers seemed familiar. The final ball, the Powerball, rolled into position, 23. My hands shook as I dug my wallet out from my jacket pocket. I unfolded the crumpled ticket and stared at it under the dim living room light. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. 17, 32, 41, 8, 59, and Powerball 23. The room started spinning. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. I must have misread the numbers on TV. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the lottery website, refreshing it repeatedly until the winning numbers appeared on the screen. They matched. Every single one. No way, I whispered to my empty apartment. No freaking way. I checked and rechecked at least 20 times, comparing each number meticulously. There was no mistake. I held the winning ticket for $390 million. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, still clutching the ticket. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently, I genuinely worried I might be having a heart attack. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool apartment. I started laughing, then crying, then both simultaneously in a concerning display of emotional whiplash. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, numbers danced behind my eyelids. I paced my small apartment, alternating between euphoric laughter and paranoid fears. What if someone broke in and stole the ticket? I hid it inside an old college textbook, then moved it to a sock, then taped it inside my toilet tank like I'd seen in some movie. By dawn, I was exhausted but still wired, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. As morning light filtered through my blinds, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, researching lottery winners. What I found was sobering, story after story of lives ruined by sudden wealth. Family estrangements, addiction, bankruptcy, even murder. The lottery curse wasn't just sensationalist clickbait, it seemed. One particular statistic stood out. 70% of lottery winners lose it all within 5 years. I decided then that I would not become a statistic. I would be smarter than that, My first decision, absolute secrecy. No one could know, at least until I had a proper plan in place. Colorado lottery rules allowed winners to remain anonymous through legal entities, a fact that brought immense relief. I spent the morning researching reputable lottery attorneys and financial advisors, making careful notes and comparison charts. By noon, I had scheduled meetings with 3 different law firms specializing in sudden wealth management. The following week passed in a blur of confidential meetings and paperwork. I claimed the ticket through a blind trust, choosing the lump sum option which, after taxes, left me with approximately $180 million. The lawyers helped me establish offshore accounts and investment structures, all perfectly legal but designed to provide anonymity and security. My financial team consisted of a primary advisor, a certified public accountant, and a wealth management specialist. They spoke in terms that initially sounded like a foreign language, discussing diversification strategies, philanthropic tax advantages, and trust configurations. I recorded our meetings on my phone, listening to them repeatedly at night to absorb the new vocabulary of wealth. Through it all, I maintained my normal life on the surface. I continued applying for jobs I no longer needed, eating ramen noodles despite having more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. My modest apartment remained unchanged, save for the new safe I had discreetly installed in my closet floor. To anyone looking, I was still just Rob the unemployed IT guy, not Rob the multimillionaire. But as the initial shock faded, a new thought began taking shape in my mind. My family had grown distant over the years. Was it because they didn't care, or just the natural drift of adult lives? With this newfound wealth, I would eventually want to help them, but first, I needed to know if they would help me. The plan formulated gradually, a simple test. I would call each of them, claiming to be in financial distress. Nothing dramatic or life-threatening, just the real situation I had been in before the win, needing temporary help to make rent and buy groceries until a new job came through. Their responses would tell me everything I needed to know about who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. I knew it was manipulative, perhaps even cruel, but after years of family tension and growing apart, I needed to know the truth before I decided who to bring into my new reality. I didn't want to reward people who only showed up once I had something to give them. As I prepared my script for the calls, I felt a gnawing anxiety. What if no one offered to help? What if everyone rejected me in my supposed time of need? Was I setting myself up for heartbreak? But deeper than that fear was another, more terrifying question. What if I already knew what their answers would be, and was just looking for confirmation of my worst suspicions about the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and pulled up my mother's contact information. It was time to find out exactly where I stood with my family. I rehearsed what I'd say to my mother at least a dozen times before making the call. Our relationship wasn't terrible, but it wasn't particularly close either. After her remarriage to Gerald, I became less of a priority. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, exchanged pleasantries about weather and health, but rarely delved into anything meaningful. She lived just 40 minutes away, yet I couldn't remember the last time I'd been invited over for dinner. Still, she was my mother, the woman who had nursed me through childhood illnesses, who had worked extra shifts to buy me a computer for school, who had taught me to drive in an empty parking lot with infinite patience. Surely that bond would count for something when I needed help. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Hello? Rob? Is everything okay? You never call on Tuesdays." Her voice was tinged with surprise and a hint of suspicion. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound tired and stressed. It wasn't difficult to channel the anxiety I'd felt before the lottery win. "I'm not doing so great, actually. That's why I'm calling." "What's wrong? Are you sick?" A sliver of concern threaded through her question. "No, not sick. I got laid off a few weeks ago. I've been applying everywhere, but nothing's coming through yet. So far, this was all true. I'm running out of options, and I'm worried about making rent this month. I hate to ask, but I could really use some help." There was a pause on the line. I could almost feel the shift in her demeanor through the phone. "How much are you talking about?" Her voice had cooled several degrees. "About $5,000, I said. "Just to cover rent and basic expenses until I find something. I promise I'd pay you back as soon as I'm working again." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. When she finally spoke, her tone had transformed entirely. $5,000? Rob, are you serious right now? That's not a small amount of money to just hand over. I know it's a lot, Mom. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. Well, Gerald and I don't just have that kind of money sitting around. We have our own bills to pay. The property taxes on the house just went up again, and we're planning a cruise next month. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I understand. Maybe a smaller amount would help? Anything, really. I'm eating ramen for every meal and I'm worried about keeping the lights on. This is exactly what emergency funds are for, Rob, she said, her voice taking on the lecture tone I remembered from adolescence. You're 32 years old. You should have at least 6 months of expenses saved by now. This is basic financial responsibility. I did have savings, I explained, the hurt in my voice now entirely genuine, but with the medical bills from my appendectomy last year and the car repairs, there's always an excuse, isn't there? She interrupted. You know your brother never asks for money. In fact, he's doing quite well for himself. Maybe you should call him for advice on financial planning instead of asking for handouts. The comparison to Mark stung, as it always had. Mom, I'm not asking for financial advice. I'm asking for help during a rough patch. Family is supposed to help each other, and parents are supposed to teach their children to stand on their own 2 feet, she countered. Gerald always says, I babied you too much, and maybe he was right. If we bail you out now, what lesson does that teach you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The lesson that family supports each other when times are tough? Rob, I love you, but I think you need to figure this out on your own. It will make you stronger in the long run. Have you tried cutting expenses? Do you really need internet and cable right now? What about driving for one of those food delivery services in the evenings? As she continued listing ways I could pull myself up by my bootstraps, I felt a hollowness expanding in my chest. This woman who had brought me into the world, who had once held me when I cried, was now lecturing me about budgeting while I supposedly faced eviction. Look, she said with finality, I need to go. Gerald and I are meeting the Hendersons for dinner. Think about what I said about the delivery driving, and maybe call that recruitment agency on Maple Street. My friend Deborah's son found work through them. Before I could respond, she added, I need to run. Love you, bye. And then she hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, stunned. Not only had she refused to help, she hadn't even taken the time to truly listen or empathize. The dinner with friends was more important than her son potentially becoming homeless. Memories flooded back unbidden. My 10th birthday, when she'd left early to meet Gerald for drinks. My high school graduation, when she'd spent more time introducing her husband to her coworkers than celebrating my achievement. The time I had pneumonia in college, and she'd sent soup through a delivery service rather than coming to see me, despite living just 30 minutes from campus. I realized with a sinking heart that this pattern had been established long ago. I had just been too loyal, too hopeful, to acknowledge it. In her hierarchy of priorities, I ranked somewhere below Gerald's golf schedule and dinner with the Hendersons. The pain was surprisingly acute. Even though I didn't actually need the money, the rejection cut deep. I had secretly hoped she would prove me wrong, that she would rush to my aid and demonstrate that beneath the distance and distraction, her maternal instinct remained intact. Instead, she had confirmed my worst fears about our relationship. I made myself a strong drink and sat by my apartment window, watching the evening traffic flow by. People returning to families who perhaps cared for them. Parents who would drop everything to help their children in crisis. I wondered how many truly had that safety net, and how many, like me, were ultimately alone when it counted. Part of me wanted to abandon the experiment right then. What was the point of confirming that my family didn't care? Why deliberately seek out more pain? But another part, the part that needed to know exactly where I stood before moving forward with my new life, pushed me to continue. 2 more calls to make, 2 more tests to administer. I pulled up my brother's contact next, steeling myself for another disappointment. But nothing could have prepared me for the cruelty that awaited on that call. Mark and I had never been close, even as children. 5 years my senior, he had always viewed me as an annoyance rather than a brother. While I was building Lego structures, he was already thinking about business ventures, selling candy at school, and charging neighborhood kids to use our basketball hoop. He left for college when I was 13, and from that point on, our interactions became increasingly limited. As adults, the distance between us grew from emotional to ideological. Mark embraced a particular brand of success worship, believing that financial achievement was the ultimate measure of a person's worth. His Facebook profile was a carefully curated showcase of business wins, exotic vacations, and networking events with people he deemed important. The captions invariably included phrases like, "crushing it," or "another day, another deal." The last time we'd been in the same room, at Thanksgiving 2 years prior, he had spent most of dinner talking about his condo in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood and the German sports car he'd just leased. When I mentioned enjoying my work in IT, he had laughed and asked, "But what's your growth strategy? When are you going to start making real money?" As if my middle-class existence was some temporary embarrassment. Despite knowing what to expect, I called him anyway. My fingers hesitated over his contact information before finally pressing the call button. He answered on the 4th ring. Ambient noise, suggesting he was at a restaurant or bar. "This better be important, Rob. I'm at dinner with clients," he said without preamble. "No hello, no how are you." "Sorry to interrupt," I said, genuine irritation mixing with my rehearsed desperation. "I wouldn't call if it wasn't important." "Well?" The impatience in his voice was palpable. "I lost my job a few weeks ago. The company downsized and eliminated my entire department." There was a pause, then a short, humorless laugh. "That's why you're interrupting my dinner? To tell me you got fired? Jesus, Rob." "I didn't get fired," I corrected. "The position was eliminated, and I'm calling because I'm in a tough spot financially. I was hoping you might be able to help me out with a loan until I find another job." "A loan?" The way he said it made the word sound dirty. "How much are we talking about?" I decided to ask for less than I'd requested from Mom. Just $2,000. For rent and bills, until I get back on my feet. I'll pay you back with interest. The laugh that followed was genuine this time, and cruel. $2,000? You're 32 years old, and you don't have $2,000 in savings? What the hell have you been doing with your life, Rob? His words stung despite my knowledge that I now had more money than he would earn in several lifetimes. I had savings, but there were medical expenses last year, and then car repairs. "Excuses," he interrupted. "Always excuses with you. This is exactly why you'll always be stuck in the same place while some of us move forward. No planning, no ambition, no foresight." I swallowed hard. "Look, I understand if you can't help. I just thought." "Thought what? That I'd bail you out because we share some DNA? I've worked my ass off for everything I have, 60-hour weeks. Networking every evening while you were probably playing video games. I earned my success." "I understand," I said quietly. "I shouldn't have called." "No, maybe it's good you did," Mark continued, warming to his topic. "Maybe this is the wake-up call you need. You've been coasting through life with this loser mentality, thinking small, settling for mediocrity. Now reality's catching up with you." I remained silent, letting him continue his tirade. "You know what I was doing at your age? Building my client base, making connections with industry leaders, positioning myself for growth. What have you accomplished? An apartment you rent and an IT job any community college graduate could do, and now you don't even have that. Are you finished?" I asked, my voice tight. "Almost. Here's my advice, little brother, since that's apparently what you're really after. Get a real job. Not another tech support position where you hide behind a computer screen. Something that pushes you to grow. Sales, maybe. Something with a competitive edge that might finally put some backbone into you." I counted to 3 silently before responding. "Thanks for the career coaching. I'll let you get back to your clients." "One more thing," Mark added. "Don't call Mom about this. She doesn't need the stress, and she can't afford to support you either. Time to stand on your own feet, Rob. Most people figure that out a decade before 32. "Goodbye, Mark," I said, but he had already hung up. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from a white-hot anger I rarely experienced. Of all the responses I had anticipated, the sheer contempt in my brother's voice had exceeded my worst expectations. The extent of his disdain was breathtaking. Not only had he refused to help, he had used my vulnerable moment as an opportunity to assert his superiority, to grind his success against my supposed failure. There wasn't a molecule of compassion in his response, not even the barest acknowledgement that I was a human being in distress, let alone his brother. I poured myself another drink and tried to process what had just happened. The relationship with my brother, already tenuous, now seemed irrevocably damaged. Even knowing I had wealth beyond his imagination brought little comfort in that moment. Money couldn't heal the wound of realizing your own brother viewed you with such contempt. For a brief, dark moment, I fantasized about revealing my new status to him, imagining his face when he realized his loser brother now had more wealth than his entire client list combined. The thought provided a fleeting satisfaction, but it quickly soured. Revenge wasn't what I wanted. What I had truly wanted was a brother who cared, and no amount of money could purchase that. I spent that evening in a state of numb reflection, reassessing a lifetime of interactions with Mark through this harsh new lens. Had he always despised me this much? Or had his values simply become so warped by his pursuit of status that he'd lost the ability to see worth in anyone who didn't share his definition of success? As the night progressed, my anger gradually subsided, replaced by a profound sadness for what our relationship could have been in a different world. Two brothers supporting each other, celebrating victories together, helping in times of hardship. Instead, we had this toxic mess of judgment and superiority. Morning brought clarity along with the sunrise. I had one more call to make, one more family member to test. My younger sister, Ashley. We had been close as children, but life had pulled us in different directions. She was now a single mother, working as a nurse in Nebraska, raising my nephew Tyler alone after her husband left when the baby was just 3 months old. We spoke perhaps once a month, usually brief catch-up calls where she sounded perpetually exhausted. I knew she struggled financially, stretching her nursing salary to cover childcare, rent, and the basics for Tyler. The thought of asking her for money seemed particularly cruel given her circumstances, but I needed to complete this experiment to truly understand where I stood with my family. With a heavy heart, I picked up the phone to make my final test call, completely unprepared for how her response would change everything. Ashley and I had been thick as thieves growing up. Despite being 3 years younger, she had always possessed a wisdom beyond her years. When neighborhood kids teased me about my secondhand clothes, she was the one who made up elaborate stories about how our attire was actually from exclusive European designers. When our parents fought late into the night, she was the one who suggested we build blanket tents and tell ghost stories to drown out the shouting. After high school, Ashley had pursued nursing with characteristic determination, working night shifts at a diner to put herself through school. When she met Jeff at 22, it seemed like her hard work was finally paying off. He was a pharmacy technician with a kind smile and steady job. They married quickly, and Tyler arrived a year later. Then Jeff revealed his true colors, the business trips that grew more frequent, the unexplained expenses, the late-night calls he took in the bathroom with the shower running. By the time Tyler was celebrating his first birthday, Jeff had cleaned out their joint account and disappeared with his regional manager, leaving Ashley with nothing but a post-it note explanation and a mountain of hidden credit card debt he'd accumulated in their names. Since then, she had rebuilt her life brick by brick, moving to a smaller apartment, picking up extra shifts, and somehow maintaining her natural optimism despite it all. Our calls became less frequent as her schedule grew more demanding, but when we did speak, she never complained. She would share Tyler's latest milestone, or a funny story from the hospital, always steering the conversation away from her struggles. I stared at my phone for several minutes before finally calling her. This felt like the cruelest test of all. I knew she had little to give, yet I was about to ask anyway. My finger hovered over her contact photo, a candid shot from years ago showing her laughing while holding baby Tyler. Finally, I pressed call. My stomach knotted with guilt. Rob, what a nice surprise. Her voice, despite sounding tired, held genuine warmth. Background noises suggested she was at home, cartoons playing softly, probably for Tyler. Hey Ash, I said, forcing myself to continue with the script, despite my reservations. How are things? Oh, you know, the usual beautiful chaos. Tyler decided today that he only wants to wear his superhero cape, including to preschool. We compromised on cape over regular clothes. Small victories, right? She laughed, and I could picture her rolling her eyes affectionately. Sounds like he's got your stubborn streak, I said, smiling despite myself. Absolutely. Speaking of which, how's the job hunt going? Find anything promising yet? She asked casually. I paused, surprised. How did you know I was job hunting? Mom mentioned you got laid off when I called her last week. I tried texting you about it, but I figured you were busy with interviews and stuff. I didn't want to bug you. My heart sank. Not only had my mother known about my situation for a week, but she had discussed it with Ashley, and still refused to help when I called. The contrast made her rejection even more painful. Yeah, about that. I began, forcing my voice to sound defeated. It's not going great. I've applied everywhere, but nothing's coming through. I hate to even ask this, but I'm in a really tight spot financially right now. What do you need? Ashley asked immediately. No hesitation whatsoever. The directness of her response momentarily threw me off script. I'm behind on rent, and my landlord is threatening eviction. I just need enough to cover that, and some groceries until something works out job-wise. How much are we talking? I couldn't bring myself to ask for the amounts I'd requested from Mom or Mark. Even a few hundred would help. Anything, really. I'm just trying to keep my head above water right now. I get paid tomorrow, she said without pause. I can send you $500. It's not much, but it should help with the immediate stuff, right? The lump in my throat was suddenly very real. Ash, I can't take your money. I know things are tight with you and Tyler. Rob, stop it. You're my brother. If you need help, I'm helping. End of discussion. Her tone brooked no argument. I've been putting a little aside each month for emergencies, and this qualifies. But what about your emergencies? I asked, genuine concern overtaking my test. We're fine, she insisted, though I knew fine was a relative term in her world. Tyler's daycare expenses actually went down a bit when he started preschool, so there's a little breathing room in the budget. I knew this was almost certainly not true. Ashley had been stretching every dollar since Jeff left. The thought that she would dip into whatever meager safety net she had managed to create for herself and Tyler made my chest ache with guilt and gratitude. I don't know when I could pay you back, I said quietly. Did I ask for repayment? She countered. Look, I remember what it was like after Jeff left, when I couldn't make rent and was eating Tyler's leftover dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets for dinner. You sent me money then, no questions asked. I had forgotten about that. It hadn't been much, maybe $700, all I could spare at the time. I had never expected or wanted it back. That was different, I protested weakly. How? Because I had Tyler. Being alone and scared doesn't hurt any less just because you don't have a kid. You helped me when I needed it. Now let me help you. I fell silent, overwhelmed by her generosity in the face of her own challenges. Actually, she continued, I have an idea. I have this weekend off. I could drive down and bring the money in person. It's only about 200 miles. Tyler would love to see his Uncle Rob, and honestly, I could use the change of scenery. Ash, that's a 4-hour drive each way. You can't do that with a 4-year-old. Tyler's a champion road tripper, and my car is running great since that repair last month. We'll leave early Saturday, stay the night if that's okay with you, and head back Sunday. I can bring some groceries too. I was genuinely speechless. Not only was she offering her last $500, but she was willing to drive 4 hours with a preschooler to deliver it in person and make sure I was okay. Are you still there? She asked after my prolonged silence. Yeah, I managed. I just don't know what to say. Say you'll clean your guest bathroom before we arrive, she teased. Tyler's in a phase where he needs to inspect every bathroom we encounter. It's weird but harmless. Despite everything, I laughed. It was so typically Ashley to diffuse an emotional moment with humor. The apartment's only one bedroom, I said. But I'll make up the couch for me, and you guys can take the bedroom. Perfect. We'll bring sleeping bags and make it an indoor camping adventure. Tyler will think it's the best thing ever. We finalized the details, agreeing to meet halfway at a diner in Grand Island for lunch before continuing to my place. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, the phone still warm in my hand. The contrast between Ashley's response and those of my mother and brother couldn't have been starker. Without hesitation, she had offered everything she could, despite having the least to give. While Mom spoke of her upcoming cruise and Mark bragged about client dinners, Ashley was ready to share her last $500 and drive for hours with a 4-year-old to deliver it personally. It wasn't just the offer of money. It was the complete absence of judgment, the immediate assumption that if I needed help, there must be a valid reason. No lectures about financial planning. No comments about my life choices or career path. Just pure, unconditional support. I looked around my apartment, suddenly seeing it through Ashley's eyes. She would expect to find me in dire straits, eating ramen and counting pennies. Instead, she would arrive to find me perfectly fine, asking for money I didn't need as some sort of twisted test. The thought made me sick with shame. I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let her drive all that way, spending gas money she couldn't afford, giving me cash that should be going to Tyler's future, all based on a lie. The experiment had gone far enough. I had my answers about my family, painful as they were. As the reality of what Ashley was willing to do for me sank in, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. The wealth I had stumbled into suddenly had a purpose beyond my own comfort and security. It was time to reveal the truth, at least to the one person who had proven worthy of it. I woke up early Saturday morning with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Ashley and Tyler would be meeting me at the Countryside Diner in Grand Island at noon, the halfway point between our homes. I had barely slept, rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain my deception without losing her trust forever. The drive gave me too much time to think. What if she was furious about the test? What if she felt manipulated and wanted nothing to do with me or my money? I had judged our mother and brother harshly for failing my test, but perhaps my administering it at all made me worse than either of them. I arrived at the diner 30 minutes early and claimed a booth by the window to watch for her car. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Vinyl booth slightly cracked with age, waitresses who called everyone honey, and the smell of coffee and bacon permeating everything. I ordered coffee and waited, nervously shredding a napkin into confetti. At exactly noon, I spotted Ashley's faded blue Corolla pulling into the parking lot. Even from a distance, I could see Tyler's car seat in the back, his little head barely visible above the window line. Ashley emerged from the driver's side looking exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore the same Denver Broncos sweatshirt she'd had for years. She helped Tyler out of his car seat, adjusted his small backpack covered in dinosaurs, and took his hand as they walked toward the entrance. My heart clenched at the sight. She had driven 200 miles with a 4-year-old, on her only weekend off, to bring me money she couldn't spare. All because I had lied about needing help. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. Tyler spotted me first, his face lighting up with recognition. "Uncle Rob," he shouted, breaking free from Ashley's hand to run toward me. I slid out of the booth just in time to catch him as he launched himself into my arms. "Hey, buddy, look how big you've gotten," I said, genuinely amazed at how much he'd grown since I'd last seen him at Christmas. Ashley approached more slowly, and I could see the dark circles under her eyes more clearly now. She'd tried to hide them with makeup, but the 4-hour drive had worn through her concealer. "You look good for someone supposedly living on ramen," she said with a tired smile, giving me a hug. "I was half expecting to find you gaunt and desperate." Guilt surged through me anew. "Ash, we need to talk," I said quietly as we slid into the booth. "But let's order first. You guys must be starving." Tyler needed no prompting, immediately informing the waitress that he wanted chocolate chip pancakes and chocolate milk, because it's a special trip to see Uncle Rob. Ashley ordered just a coffee, but I insisted she get a proper meal too. Eventually, she relented and ordered the farmer's breakfast. While Tyler colored the children's menu with crayons provided by the waitress, I tried to formulate how to begin my confession. Ashley beat me to it. "So what's really going on, Rob?" she asked softly, stirring cream into her coffee. "You don't look like someone who can't afford groceries." I blinked in surprise. "What do you mean? Your clothes are clean and new-looking. You've got a fresh haircut. Your phone is the latest model." She gestured to where it sat on the table. "Either you're prioritizing appearances over food, which isn't like you, or something else is happening." I should have known I couldn't fool her. Ashley had always been perceptive. "You're right," I admitted, dropping my voice to ensure Tyler remained absorbed in his coloring. I wasn't completely honest about my situation. Her face fell slightly. "If you're in some kind of trouble, Rob, just tell me. Are you gambling? Drugs? Whatever it is, we can figure it out." "No, nothing like that," I quickly reassured her. "It's actually—" I took a deep breath. "I need to show you something, but not here. After we eat. Can we go somewhere more private to talk?" She studied my face, concern evident in her eyes. "You're scaring me a little, but okay." We made it through the meal with forced normalcy, focusing on Tyler's animated stories about preschool and dinosaurs. Ashley kept shooting me questioning glances, but respected my request to wait. When the check came, I insisted on paying despite her protests. "There's a park across the street," I suggested as we exited the diner. "Tyler can play on the playground while we talk." Once Tyler was happily climbing on the jungle gym within our line of sight, Ashley and I sat on a nearby bench. The fall air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet. "Okay, spill it," she said. "What's going on that you couldn't tell me over the phone or in the diner?" I pulled out my phone and opened a secure folder, then handed it to her. On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Anonymous Winner Claims, $390 Million Lottery Jackpot." She glanced at it, confused. "What does this have to do with you needing money?" "Read the date," I said quietly. Her eyes widened as she noted the article was from 3 weeks ago. She looked up at me, comprehension slowly dawning on her face. "Rob, are you saying?" I nodded. "I won the lottery, Ash. I'm the anonymous winner." She stared at me in disbelief, then back at the phone, then at me again. $390 million? That's not possible. "It is possible, and it happened." I pulled out my wallet and removed a folded document, handing it to her. It was a bank statement showing a balance with more zeros than she had likely ever seen in one place. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. "I don't understand. If this is true, why would you call me asking for money?" This was the hardest part. I took a deep breath and told her everything. The initial shock of winning, the decision to remain anonymous, the calls to test my family's true colors, Mom's dismissal, Mark's cruelty, and finally, her own immediate, selfless offer to help. As I spoke, I watched her expression shift from confusion to hurt to anger. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, watching Tyler go down the slide for the 10th time. "So I was a guinea pig in your little experiment?" she finally asked, her voice unnervingly calm. "Yes," I admitted. "And I'm so sorry, Ash. I know it was manipulative and unfair." "Unfair doesn't begin to cover it, Rob. I was worried sick about you. I withdrew my entire emergency fund. I called in a favor to get this weekend off. I drove 4 hours with a cranky 4-year-old. All because you wanted to test me?" The hurt in her voice cut deeper than any anger could have. "I know," I said softly. "There's no excuse good enough for what I did. But when Mom hung up on me, and Mark called me a loser, I started to wonder if anyone in our family actually cared about me beyond obligation. Then you offered everything you had without hesitation, and I realized I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let you give me your last $500 based on a lie." She was quiet again, watching Tyler chase another child around the playground. "Did you really think I wouldn't help you?" she finally asked, and the vulnerability in her question broke my heart. "No," I said honestly. "Deep down, I knew you would. I just didn't expect how much you would be willing to sacrifice. It humbled me, Ash, And it made me realize that this money gives me a chance to help the one person who's always been there for me. She turned to look at me directly. Is that what this is about? You want to share your winnings with me because I passed your test? Not because you passed a test, I clarified. Because you reminded me what family is supposed to be. You were willing to give me everything you had when you thought I had nothing. That's not something I can ignore or forget. She shook her head. I don't want your lottery money, Rob. I don't want to be a charity case. It's not charity, I insisted. And I'm not suggesting I just hand you a check, though I would if that's what you wanted. I'm talking about setting up a college fund for Tyler, buying you a house so you don't have to worry about rent increases every year, creating a foundation together to help single parents like you who are struggling. This isn't about passing a test or earning a reward. It's about me finally being able to support you the way you've always supported me. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm still mad at you for lying, she said, but her voice had softened. You have every right to be, I agreed. Take all the time you need to be angry, but please don't refuse to let me help just because you're upset about how you found out. She wiped at her eyes with her sleeve. This is a lot to process. 3 weeks ago you were just my brother, and now you're... I'm still just your brother, I interjected. A brother who made a mistake in how he handled this, but who now has the means to make sure you and Tyler never have to worry about money again. Tyler chose that moment to run over to us, breathless and flushed with excitement. Mom, Uncle Rob, did you see me go down the big slide? We sure did, buddy, I said, grateful for the interruption. You're practically a daredevil. What's a daredevil? He asked, climbing onto the bench between us. Someone very brave, Ashley answered, ruffling his hair. Like you. She met my eyes over Tyler's head. We're going to need a lot more conversation about this, and I'm not making any decisions today. I nodded. That's fair, but will you at least come back to my place as planned? Let me treat you both to a nice dinner? No strings attached. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm still bringing the sleeping bags. Tyler's been talking about indoor camping all week. Deal, I said, relief washing over me. As we walked back to our cars, Tyler skipping between us, Ashley murmured, Just so we're clear, I'm not depositing that check you're inevitably going to try to give me. We'll see, I replied with a small smile. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her own slight smile. Lottery winner for 3 weeks and already thinking you know everything. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. The hardest conversation was behind me, and while Ashley was understandably hurt by my deception, she hadn't rejected me outright. There was a path forward, a chance to rebuild trust and create something positive from this strange situation. As I watched her buckle Tyler into his car seat, talking animatedly about what games they might play at Uncle Rob's house, I felt a surge of clarity about what my newfound wealth was truly for. It wasn't about luxury cars or mansions or status symbols. It was about creating security for the people who mattered. And in my case, that list had become very short indeed. 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. The seasons changed from fall to winter to spring, and my life transformed even more dramatically than the landscape. The modest apartment was gone, replaced by a spacious but not ostentatious house in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. My anonymous days were behind me, though I had managed to keep the exact amount of my winnings private, with media reports varying wildly from $50 million to $500 million. Ashley and Tyler now lived just 10 minutes away, in a beautiful 4-bedroom home with a backyard perfect for a growing boy's adventures. After weeks of refusing my help, she had finally relented when I framed it as an investment in Tyler's future rather than charity. We had established a trust fund for his education and set up a foundation called New Beginnings that provided grants and resources to single parents returning to school or starting businesses. The most profound changes, however, were invisible to the outside world. The lottery win had acted as a powerful filter, clarifying which relationships in my life were genuine and which were based on convenience or obligation. It had stripped away pretense and revealed raw truth in a way that no other life event could have. My mother and brother remained largely unaware of my changed circumstances for several months. I had maintained minimal contact, responding to occasional texts with brief, non-committal replies. I used the excuse of a new job that kept me busy, which wasn't entirely untrue. Managing my investments and foundation work had indeed become a full-time occupation. The truth eventually leaked when a former coworker recognized me at a charity gala and posted about it on social media. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, including, predictably, Mark and my mother. Mark's message came first, a casual text, as if we spoke regularly. "Hey, little brother, heard some interesting news about you. Let's grab lunch soon and catch up." My mother's approach was more direct. "Rob, is it true what people are saying about you winning the lottery? Why wouldn't you tell your own mother something so important? Please call me as soon as possible." I let both messages sit unanswered for several days, consulting with Ashley about how to proceed. We were having dinner in her backyard, watching Tyler test out his new play structure, when I showed her the texts. "You knew this day would come," she said after reading them. "What are you thinking of doing?" "Part of me wants to ignore them completely," I admitted. "But another part feels like I need closure, a final conversation to put everything in perspective." Ashley nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I think you should meet with them. Not for their sake, but for yours. Otherwise, you might always wonder if they would have eventually shown genuine remorse." She was right, as usual. I arranged separate meetings with each of them at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Mark arrived for his appointment in an expensive suit, hair perfectly styled, exuding the confidence of someone who believed they were about to benefit significantly from a family connection. The contrast between his current demeanor and his cruel dismissal 6 months earlier couldn't have been starker. "Rob," he exclaimed, arms open for a hug I didn't reciprocate. "You look great. Success suits you." "Does it?" I asked coolly, gesturing for him to sit. "That's an interesting observation from someone who called me a loser the last time we spoke." His smile faltered only briefly. "About that. I was under a lot of pressure with work. Didn't handle that conversation well. But water under the bridge between brothers, right? Is it?" I sipped my coffee. "Tell me, Mark, if I called you today saying I needed $2,000, what would your response be?" His laugh was uncomfortable. "Well, obviously that would be unnecessary now, given your circumstances. But hypothetically," I pressed, "if our situations were reversed and you had lost everything tomorrow, would you feel comfortable calling me for help after the way you spoke to me?" He shifted in his seat. "Look, Rob, we both said things we didn't mean. Family is family. We should be supporting each other now that things are looking up for you." "Supporting each other?" I repeated slowly. "Like when you called me a loser with no backbone who would never amount to anything?" His face flushed. "I'm trying to apologize here. Are you? Because it sounds more like you're trying to establish a relationship with my bank account." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Mark storming out after I made it clear that, while I wouldn't hold a permanent grudge, I also wouldn't be financing his lifestyle or business ventures. His parting words about family loyalty rang particularly hollow given our history. My mother's approach was different, but equally transparent. She arrived with tears already primed, launching into a speech about how worried she had been when I lost my job, how she had been just about to call with an offer of help when I stopped responding to her messages. "Mom," I interrupted gently, "we both know that's not true. I called you explicitly asking for help, and you hung up on me to go to dinner with the Hendersons." Her face crumpled in what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I was wrong, Rob. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I failed you as a mother. I let Gerald's attitudes about money and independence influence how I treated my own son." There was something almost convincing in her contrition, a flash of the mother I had known before she became so concerned with appearances and her second husband's opinions. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps there was something salvageable in our relationship. Then she continued, "I was hoping we might be able to start fresh. Gerald and I have been thinking about downsizing anyway, and with your new situation, perhaps you could help us find something more suitable for retirement. Nothing extravagant, of course." And just like that, the moment was gone. The apology wasn't about recognizing her failure as a mother. It was about positioning herself to benefit from my good fortune. The pattern that had defined our relationship for years remained unchanged, Only the specific requests had been upgraded to match my new financial status. I declined to fund her retirement upgrade but offered something different. Family counseling, a chance to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms, if she was genuinely interested. Her lukewarm response told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. These conversations, painful as they were, provided an unexpected gift: freedom from obligation. The lingering guilt I had felt about distancing myself from toxic family relationships dissolved in the face of such transparent opportunism. I wasn't cutting them off out of vengeance, but I was establishing clear boundaries based on a clear understanding of who they truly were. Meanwhile, my relationship with Ashley and Tyler flourished. We traveled together, celebrated holidays without the tension that had marked family gatherings in the past, and found a comfortable rhythm of independence and interdependence. Ashley had returned to school to pursue an advanced nursing degree, something she had always dreamed of but never thought possible as a single mother. The New Beginnings Foundation grew beyond our initial vision, partnering with community colleges to offer childcare for student parents and launching a mentorship program that paired established professionals with single parents entering their fields. What had begun as a personal project to help Ashley became a mission that gave my life purpose and direction. Perhaps the most profound change was internal. Before the lottery win, I had measured my worth by others' standards, constantly feeling I was falling short, particularly in comparison to my successful brother. Now I understood that true wealth had little to do with account balances and everything to do with how you treated others when you thought they had nothing to offer in return. Ashley had been wealthy long before I won the lottery, rich in character, compassion, and courage. Her willingness to give her last $500 and drive hundreds of miles to help her brother represented a kind of abundance that no financial windfall could create. That realization had transformed how I viewed money, success, and connection. The lottery hadn't changed who people were. It had merely revealed their true characters more clearly. My mother and brother had always prioritized status and financial advantage. Ashley had always led with her heart. The $390 million had simply brought these truths into sharper focus. 1 year to the day after the fateful lottery drawing, Ashley, Tyler, and I sat on the patio of my home, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. Tyler, now 5, was carefully catching and releasing them, his delighted laughter punctuating the peaceful evening. "Do you ever regret it?" Ashley asked suddenly. "The test, I mean. Would you rather not have known how Mom and Mark would react?" I considered her question carefully. "No," I finally said. "It was painful, but necessary. I might have spent years trying to buy their approval or affection, never understanding that some relationships can't be fixed with money or success." She nodded thoughtfully. "And some relationships don't need fixing because they were never broken." "Exactly," I smiled, watching Tyler race across the lawn after a particularly bright firefly. "The money gave me freedom and security, but you gave me something far more valuable. The knowledge that I was always worthy of love and support, even when I had nothing to offer in return." Ashley squeezed my hand. "That's what family is supposed to be." "I know that now," I said softly. "Better late than never." As the stars emerged above us and Tyler exhausted himself chasing magical lights through the grass, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that gas station quick pick to this moment had been unpredictable and often painful, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. I had won the lottery twice, really. Once with a random set of numbers that changed my financial reality overnight, and once with the sister who showed me what true wealth looked like long before I had millions in the bank. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you suddenly came into unexpected wealth? Would you tell everyone or keep it to yourself? If you've enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Share in the comments what you think you'd do first if you won the lottery tomorrow. Would you test your relationships like I did, or would you take a different approach? Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes life's most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most surprising packages.